Good morning, class. We are starting off with our chapter 11. Yesterday we talked about our key terms for the chapter. So let's do a quick review of these key terms. We moved away from the sod busters, which was all about the agriculture and farming. Now we're going into the industries. At the end of the 1800s, the industries started booming. We started getting more factories. So let's see what we remember about that. What is industrialization? Oh. Yes, the process of developing large-scale mechanical factories. So industrialization is getting those factories running. Industry. What is an industry, Brian?
A specific branch of business that provides a certain product or service.
So the industry is the specific branch. So it's not all encompassing, it's one specific thing. So we talked about how our title of the chapter is flour, lumber, and iron. Those are three specific industries. They don't combine, you don't mix them together, they're each separate. Our next one is industrialist. Who is an industrialist? We talked about how that IST tells us it's going to be a person. So who is an industrialist? Julian? The owner or manager of the large business. So think about the person who owns that industry, that factory. What does it mean to invest? Paul? So it's a business term. In business, when you invest, you put money into something, offering potential profit. So you're investing in the business, hoping that you're going to get money back out of that business. You're going to make a profit on it. Then we talked about bushel. What is a bushel, right?
From a unit of measurement for agricultural crops that equals 1.25 cubic feet.
Yep, so a bushel is a unit of measurement for the crops. So we talked about how we would say there's like a bushel of wheat, the 1.25 cubic feet of wheat. We don't use it for the iron ore, it's used for crops. So it's a specific type of measurement used to measure the crops that you grow. And our last one is the iron ore. Andrea? Yep, so the iron ore is that rock that you find, that natural resource, and you can extract the iron out of it. You can remove the iron from it and then use the iron to make things. So the iron ore is the rock that we get iron from. So we talked about how up north there's the Iron Range that's still running today. So when you drive up, go past Duluth, you'll see the huge mounds of black rock. That's the iron ore. All right, so yesterday we read the intro section. So today we can jump right into the flour section. So we're going to learn about that first industry on page 218, Charles Pillsbury and the flour milling industry. And we know Charles Pillsbury's name. Why? Why does that name sound familiar?
Because it's like a cereal kind of.
Because Pillsbury is a brand that we have here in Minnesota. It's a very common, famous brand. They make cereal, they make cake mixes, they make flour. You go down the baking aisle in the grocery store and you see a lot of Pillsbury boxes for different things. So Pillsbury is still a very common brand, and we're going to learn about how it got started. So page 218. Minneapolis was a town of small businesses when 27-year-old Charles Pillsbury arrived in 1869. Pillsbury had grown up in New Hampshire. There, he had learned the ins and outs of the business world while working for a company that distributed farm produce to nearby markets in Montreal, Canada. When Pillsbury came to Minneapolis, he was thinking big, not small. He planned to start his own business, and he wanted that business to be large. The industry he chose was flour milling. So yesterday I was talking about my stepsister who has her little Etsy shop. She does her crafts that people have purchased, their jewelry that people have purchased. She is not looking to make a big industry. She just wants something small that she can do out of her house. Charles Pillsbury, at 27, he's very ambitious. He's saying, I want to have a big company so I can make a lot of money. So he's looking at the big picture. He wants to grow his business. He doesn't want something small. He doesn't want the small town little shop on Main Street. He wants a big business. So he's thinking, hey, Minnesota, there's lots of wheat. If I can make a flour company, I can use all of that wheat and make a big business out of it. So flour mills had been grinding wheat into flour at the Falls of St. Anthony for 15 years by the time Pillsbury arrived. The amount of flour produced, however, was small compared to major milling centers such as St. Louis, Missouri. Pillsbury and a few other industrialists, people who owned or managed manufacturing businesses, set out to change that. So they saw a model, they saw what they were doing in St. Louis, and they said, look at how huge it is there. Look at that big industry. Look at how small it is here in St. Anthony. We want to make it bigger. So a few months after arriving in Minneapolis, Pillsbury took a gamble. He invested in a failing flour mill, hoping he could turn it around. Pillsbury later recalled, the other fellows in the business rather pitied me and said that another poor devil had got caught in the milling business. So people are saying, that mill has been here for 15 years. It's not making money. It's a failing business because it's not thriving. It's not growing. So here comes another guy who's going to lose all of his money to it. But Pillsbury's saying, yeah, I'm looking at how St. Louis is making their money. I'm looking at what is successful for them, and I'm going to make changes. So I want to make this a successful company. Pillsbury knew he was getting into a tough business and that he would have to work hard in order to succeed. Within 5 years, his business was flourishing. What does flourishing mean, Andrea?
Really succeeding.
Yeah, it's really succeeding. It is booming. It's getting big. With his new wealth, he could afford to invest in improvements to his mill and buy additional ones. By the late 1870s, production at his mills had increased from 300 barrels of flour a day to 3,000 barrels a day. Other mill owners also expanded their operations in Minneapolis and saw similar increases in production. So he was able to take what he learned from what they were doing in St. Louis and make those changes to make it a profitable business. And now it's a huge business, from 300 to 3,000 barrels a day, which is huge. And the more money that he makes, that more profit, he can sink that back into his company to make it more efficient, to get better machines, to grow it and make it bigger. So the more you make, the more you can buy to make it better, to make even more profit. Flour industry essentials. Pillsbury and other flour mill owners relied on money plus a combination of natural resources, new machines, and the labor of people in order to be successful. In the decades after the Civil War, these essentials came together to make Minnesota the flour milling capital of the world. So we know that we had king wheat here in Minnesota. It was the major crop that we grew. So they called them king wheat. And now, because we have all of this wheat, now we're becoming the world's, the biggest flour milling capital of the world. So he was a big part of that. So Pillsbury was saying, I want to make this as big as I can. And he succeeded at that. Natural resources. The land of southern and western Minnesota was excellent for farming. Once covered in prairie grasses, this land was converted to farmland by settlers after the United States acquired it through treaties made with the Dakota and the Ojibwe. The rich, deep soil beneath the prairie was ideal for growing wheat, the preferred grain of flour millers. So remember what we talked about in the last chapter with the sod busters. They had to break up the prairie sod, and underneath it was this wonderfully rich soil that was excellent for growing crops. As more land was farmed, the supply of wheat increased dramatically from 1,400 bushels in 1850 to nearly 19 million bushels in 1870. So that's in 20 years. Look at how much it grew. All of those farmers coming in. Remember, at first they were just the subsistence farmers, just farming for themselves until they were able to break up enough sod on all of the acres that they got. They could get up to 160 acres from the Homestead Act, but they had to farm it all within 5 years. So they were motivated to break up all of that sod and to be able to start their farming. So within 20 years, all of that land now is getting farmed, so they were growing all that wheat. By the end of the 1800s, Minnesota was the leading wheat producing state in the nation, which makes sense because we're hearing about how king wheat, and it grows so great in our soil. And we have all the flour mills right here in Minnesota, so it makes it convenient. Wheat was valuable because it could be made into flour. In the 1850s and 1860s, it was mostly milled or ground into flour near where it was grown. Local flour mills were built along the rivers and streams of southern and western Minnesota. The moving water supplied the power needed to turn grindstones that ground the wheat. These small mills supplied flour to the surrounding towns and farms. So you would see the mills right by the rivers, and it would use the energy from the flowing water of the river to turn the mills. That's what they used to grind it. Because did they have electricity back then? Not yet. So they didn't have electricity to run the machines. So they used the power from the running water to turn the machines. So it was very popular for the mills to be right by the rivers. And then the farmers would take their flour to their town, the closest town that had the mill. And then in turn, the flour mills would supply the towns with their flour. So it was a small operation. By the 1870s, however, the area around the Falls of St. Anthony became the center of flour milling in Minnesota. The wide waterfall in the Mississippi River provided enough water power to operate huge mills, much larger than the local mills farmers had previously relied on. How many of us have seen the St. Anthony Falls? Has anybody seen them? How many of us have seen Minnehaha Falls? Okay, so a lot of us have seen Minnehaha Falls. So those waterfalls, think about when that water's coming down, it's coming down fast, right? When it's a waterfall, it's not just a lazy river. It's not like the Mississippi that's just kind of flowing down. So the Mississippi, you can get power from it because the water's moving, but there's not a lot of power. Think about a waterfall and how hard that water's coming over the side. It's coming a lot faster, so it can turn bigger machines. The bigger the machine, the more the more wheat you can grind up to make the flour. So they were harnessing all that energy at St. Anthony because of those waterfalls. They were using the power of the waterfall to make bigger factories. As the fast-moving water flowed over the falls, it turned turbines and water wheels. These turbines then spun the shafts that powered the grindstones inside the mills. Producing flour required natural resources abundant in Minnesota, land for growing wheat, and water power to operate the mills. So we know that king wheat was easy to grow and grew really well. And then they needed the waterfalls to power the huge turbines and the big machines to grind up the flour. So it was very important to use those waterfalls. And that's what Pillsbury kind of capitalized on. He wasn't going to go to the small town and use the slow-moving rivers energy. He went right to where the most energy was so he could have the biggest machines and make a bigger factory. Machines. Let's see, before we read that, let's read the green box. Money, goods, and services going round and round. So we kind of saw a diagram like this when we were talking about the North and the South with the cotton plantations and the factories for making clothes. So let's look at how that works with the wheat. Your household is part of the economy in Minnesota. Here's one way to think of it. Picture an ongoing cycle or continuous circle of money and goods and services. Every time you buy a good or service, your household gives money to a business for it. So we go to Costco and we buy the bulk pasta that we were talking about in math class. So we're buying all that pasta. Our money is going to the business. We're helping to support that company. The work being done is one example of a resource. In this case, oh wait, I skipped a line. Every time someone from your household goes to work, his or her employer, a business, gives money to your household. So mom, dad, brother, sister, somebody going to a job is getting money for the work that they're doing. The work being done is one example of a resource. Is that a natural resource? Is your work considered a natural resource? No, because it's not. You can't go out into nature and see work, right? But it is a resource because it's something that you are doing. So the work being done is one example of a resource. In this case, a human resource rather than a natural resource. Now let's take this idea and apply it to the three industries below. They helped Minnesota's economy grow because households across the state, the nation, and the world paid money for the goods these industries provided. At the same time, businesses paid workers from many Minnesota households to produce the goods the households were buying. So you have that, look at our circle. You have the households, they provide work to the businesses, and the businesses then give wages, the money back to the households. So then the households give their money to businesses to buy stuff, and in turn they get the goods and services. So it goes both ways. We need to work to make money, and we need that money to pay for the stuff that the businesses need. The businesses need us to buy their products so they can pay their employees. So it's an ongoing circle. So let's look at our three different industries. Flour milling. Households spend money on flour. Want to make a cake, you need the flour. The workers at the companies such as Pillsbury get paid to produce the flour. So then the money that they get paid, they can go and buy stuff with. And the money that the companies get from people buying their stuff, they can pay their workers. And it goes on in that circle. The lumber, households buy lumber to build new homes. Lumberjacks and sawmill workers get paid by owners like Weyerhaeuser to cut timber and process the lumber. So again, it's that circle. We use our money to buy the wood. The company uses the money that we paid to buy the wood to pay the workers. So the workers can use the money to buy the wood, and the companies use that money to pay their workers. So it goes on in the circle. Iron mining. Households buy goods manufactured with steel, which is made from iron. You want to get a good pot, you need to buy it from the iron mines, from the manufacturers of the iron. Miners get paid by companies such as U.S. Steel to mine iron. Factory workers get paid to help turn it into steel. So it's that ongoing circle. All of these industries, you'll notice it's a pattern. The workers get paid. They use their money to buy stuff. The companies use the money that people give them to buy stuff to in turn pay their workers. So it keeps going on and on. Let's see. I think we have enough time to read about the machines. Until the 1870s, flour made from Minnesota wheat was speckled with brown flecks of bran and germ. These flecks made bread less appealing, slower to rise, and faster to decay than bread made with pure white flour. In Pillsbury's words, it was way down at the bottom of the heap. So when they first started producing the flour, it wasn't pure flour. So it wasn't that white flour that now we buy in the bags at the store. You can get the white flour. This flour had bran in it, and it had germ, not germs that make you sick, but germ that's a part of the wheat. So it made the bread take a long time to raise. So you had to bake it for a long time. It also made it so it goes moldy faster. We want our bread to last longer because we don't want to have to throw stuff away. Okay, if it's only you and two other people eating that big loaf of bread, you're not going to eat it in a day or two. So we want it to last a little bit longer. So it wasn't ideal. That was before the Minneapolis millers started using machines that greatly improved the quality of their flour. A new machine called the Middlings Purifier, so it was the Middlings Purifier, removed the brown flecks, which turned Minnesota wheat into the white flour that consumers preferred. In addition, the old millstones were being replaced by steel rollers. These ground the flour finer and faster, improving quality and increasing production. By the early 1880s, Minnesota flour was considered some of the best in the world. So because we have all those railroads, we can make the flour here in Minnesota and we can get it out to other parts of the country and other parts of the world. So now our consumer base has grown. So we're getting, the demand has gone up for the flour. So we want to make the supply go up, and they're going to be making more money. With the more money, they can get the better machines, they can get those steel rollers, and they can make it a bigger industry. Machines were also needed to transport the wheat and flour. The expansion of railroads in Minnesota beginning in the 1870s was key to this industry's success. Railroads allowed farmers to ship their wheat to mills in Minneapolis and allowed mill owners to ship their flour to the rest of the country. Bonanza Farms. Let's look at the purple box. Over time, people find new ways to use the same land. During the 1870s and 1880s in Minnesota and also North Dakota, a certain kind of farm called a Bonanza Farm became a phenomenon and then died out. So it got really popular and then people stopped doing it. A Bonanza Farm was an extremely large farm that grew only one crop, usually wheat. Most of these farms ranged from 3,000 to 7,000 acres. Some were as large as 45,000 acres. Think about what we learned about in the last chapter with diversified farming and why these Bonanza farms might not have lasted. Bonanza farms only had one crop. What did we learn was a problem with that, Sam?
They use the same nutrients.
Yeah, if they're growing the same crop every year after year, they're taking the same nutrients out of the ground. That can only go on for so long, and then that crop won't grow anymore. So a variety of factors led to the sudden, brief success of these farms. Availability of farmland, large numbers of settlers wanting to farm, expansion of the railroads, and improved milling technology. Then, after a period of prosperity, Bonanza Farms exhausted the land. So you might think to yourself, how can land get exhausted? Exhausted means you're really tired. How can land get tired? Well, it goes back to what Sam was saying about the nutrients. When you take all of those nutrients out, you're exhausting the land of the nutrients. So instead of your body being exhausted of energy, the land is being exhausted of the nutrients. So the wheat had drawn so many nutrients from the soil that it could no longer produce a healthy crop. This made it harder for farms that grew only wheat to make a profit. So Bonanza Farms died out. So they kind of exploded and then they went away because they used up all the nutrients and then they had to do something different. So they made money off of it for a while, but because it wasn't diversified, they couldn't support it for a long period of time. So with that, we're going to stop with our reading. We'll finish up with flour tomorrow, and we'll probably start on the lumber tomorrow. So we'll finish with flour and get started on the lumber. And for our friends that are listening at home, we hope you are well, and we hope to see you soon.